Okay, we're on page 2 of lesson 1, the fill in the blank. So we just were beginning number 22. So two angles that share a common side. So let's draw one angle. And then it says the two angles share a common side. So look at this angle. We'll call this angle 2. And look at this angle, angle 1. See how they share a common side? So guess what they're called based on what's left? Adjacent angles. So now we'll be able to fill in on page 1 that one that was missing, because remember how I said it could be either one of those. So now we know adjacent is filled in. So adjacent just means they're beside each other. So that's an appropriate name since they are beside each other and they share a common side. So angle 2 has this as a side and angle 1 has that as a side as well. So now we can go back and fill in here. Since we know adjacent's gone, that leaves vertical. So this is what vertical angles look like. They're opposite. Some books actually call them opposite angles. And if you read through the glossary, you would see that they're also equal. So this vertical angle 1 is equal to this vertical angle 1. This vertical angle 2 is equal to this vertical angle 2. So opposite angles or vertical angles are equal. They're not all four equal to each other unless these lines are perpendicular, but the opposite angles are. So those are called two pairs of vertical angles. And we can go up there and cross it off. So it looks like there was about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 we didn't use on that one. So anybody know what isosceles is? Isosceles means there's two equal sides. So we learned right here that when there's no equal sides, it's called scalene. When there's two equal sides, it's isosceles. And then we can even go a step further and say when there's three equal sides, it's called equilateral. All in your packet. I think everything else you probably already know. You know what a cube is. It's like a die. Maybe you don't know what a rhombus is. A rhombus is a parallelogram, which means opposite sides are parallel, but it has four equal sides. So what makes it different than a square? It's a square without the right angles. So it's a square in the fact that it has the four equal sides, but it doesn't have the right angles. So that's the difference between a rhombus and a square, which we're going to talk about more in a bit. Okay, let's go ahead and turn to page 2. Tell whether the statement is true or false. So I like to draw a picture. So here's my rectangle. Is that a square? No. It has to have four equal sides to be a square. So a rectangle is a square? No. And just FYI, if you don't know this about true false, when you write true down, it has to be true 100% of the time. So if there's one rectangle that is a square because it has four equal sides, that doesn't make it true. It has to be true 100% of the time. And that rectangle right there is not a square. So that's false. How about a square being a rectangle? So what's required for a rectangle is that it has four right angles. So does a square have four right angles? Yep. So guess what? Every square is a rectangle. Every square is a rectangle. We call it a rectangle with four equal sides. So a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square because it doesn't have the four equal sides. Isosceles, we just talked about, has two equal sides. So if it has two equal sides, can it be the same as an equilateral, which has three equal sides? No. An equilateral triangle looks like this. So if I don't know all three sides are equal, it can't be equilateral, so that is false. Now we're going to go backwards, and this is, I remember some of my students when I used to teach high school geometry, this is like when they said, oh my gosh, I hate geometry. It's so confusing. I would not put one of these. I mean, I did put this on the Module 4 test. We're not taking that, but it's not on the final. So this is just trying to give us background so we know the vocab when we do go on to the problems that are final exam. So this says, okay, here's equilateral. Is it isosceles? Yes, because isosceles requires at least two sides equal, and equilateral has at least two sides equal. So every equilateral triangle has two sides equal. That makes it isosceles. But every isosceles doesn't have three sides equal, so it's not equilateral. A four-sided figure always has parallel sides. So sometimes when the wording gets ugly, I just change it to my language. Is every four-sided figure have parallel sides? Parallelogram has opposite sides parallel. So here's one example I can say that doesn't. Here's one pair of parallel sides, but are these parallel? No. So if I can think of one quadrilateral that doesn't have both sides opposite parallel, then it's false. Because remember, when you write true, it has to be 100% of the time. A parallelogram. So do you guys know what a parallelogram looks like? So it has opposite sides equal and opposite sides parallel. So a parallelogram has four sides? Yes, it does. So see how I change it to language that's familiar so it's easier to do. So I know what a parallelogram looks like, and I say, does it always have four sides? Yes. Vertical angles are beside. Remember how we learned adjacent means beside? Are vertical angles beside each other? No, they're not. They're opposite each other. So let's write opposite. So that would be false. So adjacent would be like here and here where they share a side. Vertical are opposite, so they are not the same thing. Adjacent, vertical. A trapezoid has four sides. Well, think back to when we were doing the pattern blocks. Did that red trapezoid have four sides? Absolutely. And a quadrilateral is a trapezoid. So remember, 100% of the time, is every single quadrilateral a trapezoid? No. Here's a quadrilateral that's not a trapezoid. Here's a quadrilateral that's not a trapezoid. Here's a quadrilateral that's not. There's one quadrilateral that is, but not all of them. So if it's not true 100% of the time, we have to write false. So this is more like, this next one, more like what we just did. So here's a rhombus. It has four equal sides. So really what a rhombus is it's a parallelogram with four equal sides. So is that rhombus a square? No. Jane is incorrect. So this is not a square because a square requires four equal sides, right? So Jane is incorrect. And sometimes they're both correct. Sometimes they're both incorrect. Sometimes it's one of each. So don't always assume because Jane's incorrect, Scott is correct. So you got to analyze each situation. So Scott says a square is a rhombus. So here's a square. A rhombus requires four equal sides. Does that have four equal sides? Yes, it does. So that is a rhombus. So Scott is correct because a square has four equal sides, which is what a rhombus requires. So a rhombus is not a square because it doesn't have 4 right angles. But a square is a rhombus because it has 4 equal sides, and that's all a rhombus requires. So Scott is correct because a square has 4 equal sides. And like I said, we're not going to have any of this really specific stuff on the final exam. Our final exam is going to be more like circumference, area, perimeter. I think there's one volume question. But this is just giving you a background, familiarizing yourself. So I don't want you guys freaking out going, oh my God, I can't remember all this by the time the final comes. Because I'm not going to be that specific. Okay? This is just to help you recognize the forms, learn your vocabulary. So don't freak out on me, guys. Okay? Okay, let's do this last one and then we'll start a new packet on the next video. So this is basically the same thing as the one above, but we're just doing 2 different scenarios. So a square has 4 equal sides, 4 right angles. Is it a rectangle? Absolutely, because all that's required of a rectangle is 4 right angles, and a square has it. So this is correct because a square has 4 right angles. Oh, off the page a little bit. So this square is a rectangle because it has 4 right angles. So this one's correct. A square is a parallelogram. So let's go back to our picture. So we have 4 equal sides. So a parallelogram, remember its name gives it away, has opposite sides parallel. Does a square have opposite sides parallel? Yes. And yes, remember parallel means they never intersect. They go on forever, same distance apart. So that one's correct too. So a square is a parallelogram because it has opposite sides parallel, which is the requirement for the parallelogram. So this is correct because a square has opposite sides parallel, which is the requirement for the parallelogram, hence the name. Okay. So don't dwell too much. Great thing to practice. Read your glossary, look over this, familiarize yourself, but don't stress too much. I'm not going to be specific. I know we're learning geometry in 2 days, so I'm just going to ask you the basics. And when you do your final exam review, you'll get to see the kind of questions I ask. Okay, I'll catch you on the next video, and we'll be doing the packet called Lines and Angles on the next video. So have that one printed, okay? See you in a bit.